Hello and welcome back. I hope everyone had a great holiday break and a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. This is my 14th Tales from the Crypt video, covering some of the best and scariest stories of the series. Slowly but surely, we're chipping away at the entire show. Now that I've covered all the movies, and with this video, a total of 55 episodes, that leaves us with only 38 episodes left. And I gotta admit, I'm gonna be a little sad when we reach the final story. But don't worry. The Crypt Keeper won't be disappearing from this channel. I've got a few ideas to keep him alive, even once we've gone through all the episodes. And as I've mentioned before, all my recap and review videos are available ad-free and mostly uncensored on my Patreon page. I'm having a small issue with my page right now, but it should be resolved by the time this video goes live. I'll give more details at the end of the video. I'm also planning to restart my Reset podcast with my brother in the next few weeks. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's a catch-all show where we talk about anything and everything. At the end of this video, I'll link one of my favorite episodes where my brothers and I share real paranormal encounters we've experienced. But with all that out of the way, let's open the crypt and dive into some truly spooky stories. Our first story is titled Only Sin Deep, from Season 1, Episode 4, originally airing on June 14th, 1989. Our story opens on a wet night in New York City. We fall on Sylvia Vane, a narcissistic prostitute working late nights in the red light district with her friend Raven. Raven's pimp, named Smitty, comes to collect. He tries to enlist Sylvia as one of his working girls, but Sylvia sees herself as a solo enterprise. After buffing Smitty's advances, Raven and Sylvia see a rich man and his wife entering a building across the street. Raven sneers and says every night is party night for the rich. Sylvia says she's meant for that kind of life, making her friend laugh. She continues by asking what that woman has that she doesn't, and Raven snidely remarks, "A rich man." Sylvia says it won't be that way for long before luring Smitty into an alley. She makes it seem like she's taking him up on his offer, but pulls a gun on him, robbing him of his jewelry. Smitty grabs her arms, and in the struggle, he's shot in the stomach multiple times, killing him nearly instantly. Sylvia walks away, saying for her it was strictly business. She walks out into the street, her ill-gotten gains in hand, smiling at Raven, telling her she's now a free agent as she walks past. Sylvia goes to a pawn shop to sell the pimp's valuables, saying they belong to a friend that got run over. In the middle of the shop's owner looking over the items, a woman comes in with her face covered in a veil. She tosses insults at the man whose name we find out is Joe, and begins smashing stuff off the counter before storming out. Sylvia just laughs, but her smile comes to an end when Joe recognizes that the jewelry is stolen and that he wants nothing to do with it. Sylvia argues and storms out, but Joe stops her and suggests another business deal. He offers her $10,000 in cash for her beauty. Sylvia smiles at the idea. She sits in the chair, counting the money, overjoyed at the idea of having so much money for a simple plaster mold. But Joe warns her this isn't just a mold of her face. He'll be capturing her beauty, but that she has 4 months to pay him back if she wants to retrieve it. Sylvia laughs and agrees, and Joe begins to pour the plaster onto her face. She begins wincing in disgust, and the camera pans over, showing the molds of other women who are seemingly looking on with their expressions frozen in time. Sylvia walks out of the pawn shop with a snide grin plastered across her face, thinking that she scored a major payday for almost no work on her end. Joe is shown doing an incantation over his new plaster mold, blowing dust into the air. He talks to a person unseen, telling them that it's almost time, and that he nearly has everything he needs to make her look just as she once did, before the camera pans to show a decomposed woman in a wedding gown sitting up in a coffin. Sylvia uses the cash to get a makeover, then scours through multiple fashion magazines, trying to find the perfect outfit. She tries on many before finding the perfect one. She's seen getting out of a limo by Raven, who looks on in disbelief. She crashes one of Ronnie Price's parties, exiting the elevator looking her best. She sees Ronnie Price and begins flirting from afar. She draws him in like a fish on a hook. They talk on Ronnie's balcony. She fakes like she's going to leave, and Ronnie succumbs to her flirtations. and they start a relationship. Nearly 4 months later, Sylvia has everything she ever wanted, but she begins to notice that she starts showing signs of aging. She stares at herself in the mirror, noticing the small imperfections. Ronnie says she's worrying for nothing, and that she looks beautiful, before kissing her goodbye and leaving on his business trip. She continues to worry, even going to visit a doctor with a black veil covering her face. The doctor rules out many things. Frustrated, Sylvia removes the veil and sternly asks, "If nothing is abnormal, then what's wrong with my face?" He tells her that it appears that her face is aging at an accelerated rate. He stresses the need for her to remain calm and asks her to think back about anything in her recent history that might have caused this. She remembers her deal with Joe. It comes back to her in flashes. The woman smashing up his shop, him offering her money for her beauty, the plaster molding. She gets up and runs from the doctor's office and back to the pawn shop. She walks in, screaming at a woman to leave. She slams her ticket onto the table and gives Joe back the $10,000 plus 12%. But Joe points out that she didn't read the ticket, saying that the deadline is passed by 1 day and that she's too late. She pulls a gun on Joe, demanding that he give her beauty back. Joe reluctantly agrees, but says the price to redeem her beauty is now $100,000. Just then, a cop walks into the pawn shop and Sylvia stows her gun. The cop is there to eat lunch with his friend Joe. Sylvia leaves in silence. She returns to Ronnie's lavish apartment, and in desperation, Sylvia steals as many valuables as she can. Her aging has become more rapid, and she appears older every time she looks in the mirror. Ronnie shows up. He's about to call the police when he sees Sylvia, who has aged seemingly years since he's last seen her. So much so that Ronnie doesn't recognize her and thinks she is a desperate homeless woman trying to rob him. Ronnie picks up the phone and calls the police. As the phone rings, Sylvia looks on in anger. She pulls out a gun and shoots him multiple times. Sylvia runs back to Joe's pawn shop but finds the business closed, with all the doors locked. She pounds on the doors until she breaks one of the locks and rushes inside. She finds her face mold in the back of the shop, surrounded by candles. She opens the door to reveal Joe's wife. She's no longer a decomposed husk, but instead she's now a beautiful woman. Joe taps her on the shoulder, jump scaring her. Joe smiles and says that's how his wife used to look. He says that he needs other women's beauty to keep her looking that way. He remarks that he believes it's a small price to pay. She pushes Joe back and dumps the bag of jewels onto the table. She says all that is worth more than $100,000. She removes her veil and demands her beauty back. He says he could do that if that's what she really wants, revealing a newspaper with her photo on it, saying that she's wanted for the murder of Ronnie Price. The policeman friend of Joe's returns with coffee. Walking into the pawn shop, they discuss Ronnie Price's murder, noting that the weapon was left at the crime scene with fingerprints. The cop says it's as good as a signed confession, saying the moment she shows her face anywhere, she'll end up going straight to the electric chair. Sylvia listens as she caresses the mold of her face. She hugs it close to her as she slowly leaves out the back door. Sylvia flees the shop and crosses the street. It's there that she bumps into Raven, making her drop the mask. It shatters into pieces on the ground. Raven, not recognizing her, insults Sylvia, calling her old and ugly. Sylvia drops to her knees, frantically trying to pick up the pieces as the screen fades to black. When it comes to Only Sin Deep, the story was adapted from A Tale in the Haunt of Fear, issue number 24. The TV adaptation expands the base idea into something much darker and more tragic. Sylvia Vane isn't just vain. As her name implies, she's a woman using her looks as a survival tool in a harsh, class-driven world. Most of the story remains the same, aside from taking place in a different time period, with the comic set in the 1950s and the show taking place in the 1980s. The biggest difference, however, is the ending. In the comic, once the beauty is gone, that's essentially the punchline. In the show, Sylvia tries to fight back, even resorting to murder, but it doesn't matter. There's no loophole, no escape, and no mercy. The TV version turns a simple EC cautionary tale into a bleak statement about how power, youth, and beauty are temporary, and how the world discards people once those things are gone. Where the comic ends quickly and cruelly, the episode lets the horror of her actions and her fate linger. This episode is often confused with the similarly titled Only Skin Deep, which I previously covered and mentioned as one of my all-time favorites of the series. Only Skin Deep was written for television by Fred Decker and directed by Howard Deutsch. The casting of Leah Thompson as Sylvia Vane caught a lot of people off guard at the time, with her most famous roles being the Back to the Future films. She went completely against type by playing a character who's brash, harsh, and uses vulgar language. Then there's Britt Leach, who played the pawn shop owner, and to me is most recognizable from the comedy classic The Great Outdoors, where he played a man who was struck by lightning 66 times. Actually, by the end of the movie, it's 67 times. Overall, it's a great story and has that signature EC Comics twist that us horror fans love. And being only the 4th episode ever of the show, it's a strong early entry that helps lure viewers into watching even more episodes in the long-running series. Our second story is titled Halfway Horrible from Season 5, Episode 12, originally airing on December 1st, 1993. Our story starts off in a brightly lit morgue, where Roger Lassen, the owner of a large chemical company, is asked by the police to identify the body of his business associate named Dan King. The detective asks if they worked for the same company. Roger says that he didn't just work with them, he co-founded their company. The detective notices a glowing blue liquid pooling at the bottom of the table. Roger reveals that it's Xtine B, a powerful new preservative his company is about to introduce. Roger asks what happened. The detective reveals that Dan injected 40 cc's of the chemical into his neck, grimly joking that the coroner told him that Dan's head won't rot for at least 100 years. He then asks what's in the chemical that makes it glow like that. Roger reveals it's a compound only found in the rainforest. The detective hands Roger a bag, saying he found it in his pocket. Roger turns it over to reveal the message, "I've not forgotten or forgiven," written neatly on the torn paper. The detective says they thought it was a suicide note, but remarks that the handwriting isn't matching with anything else he's written. Roger pulls back the sheet, revealing symbols on Dan's chest. He puts the cover back in disgust. The detective says someone drew it on him, probably after he died. Roger asks for an aspirin as he looks over a photo of 4 men handed to him by the detective. Roger points out that the photo was taken in Brazil. He identifies Dan and himself along with 2 other men named Kevin and Alex, before revealing that Alex died in Brazil not too long after the photo was taken. The detective asks if they have any shared enemies. Roger reminds him that he's the president of an international chemical company, and that enemies are listed in the job description. He continues to ask if he knows of anybody with access to the chemical that would want Dan or him dead. Roger looks at the photo and remarks, "Not for a very long time." He then flashes back to 6 years earlier. A tribal man walks around a fire and hands Roger a bowl of the glowing blue fluid. He feeds it to an older man in a box, the blue liquid spilling down the man's chest as he drinks. Dan says what they're doing is crazy, and Roger reminds him that they're down here to learn, as he uses black paint to write symbols on the man's chest. Kevin remarks that they're going to hell. Roger laughs and says that may be, but what a ride it's going to be, as he continues to finish the symbol. The other tribesmen put a lid on the casket and lower it into the ground. The group says that what they're doing is evil. Roger watches on, saying everyone has an evil side. They just need to keep it on a tight leash. Back in the present, Roger returns home. He flicks on the lights to reveal his furniture has been overturned and someone spray painted "I've not forgotten or forgiven" in bold black on his living room wall. He calls the detective over, and they talk again. Roger chews on more aspirin, pissed off and saying that the problem is that they know where he lives. The detective asks how he knows it's a he. Roger says it doesn't matter if it's a him or a her. What matters is that they know where he lives. The detective advises that Roger get out of town for a few days and allow them to track down the person who did all this. Roger refuses, saying that he waited years for the FDA to approve Xtine B, and it's only about a week away from being unveiled. The detective advises against it, but says that it's his life before going to leave. But he stops and turns around. He asks Roger again if there's anybody that comes to mind that would want to do this. Roger shakes his head and says nobody. But after the cop leaves, there's a telling look on his face, revealing that he has a name. The person just isn't alive. We again visit the past. Kevin and Dan find out how the blue liquid is made and make a batch themselves. Roger returns and is excited to see it glowing in the vial. Roger says the local police are going to try to bust them on visa charges and that they need to leave as soon as possible. Dan asks where Alex is, and Roger says he went back to town and is going to catch a flight back tomorrow. Kevin and Dan question him, but Roger blows them off, saying that unless they want to get caught, they've got to pack up and leave Brazil now. Before walking off, Dan asks where he's going, and Roger shouts back that he'll catch up later. Roger goes back to the fire and is handed a glowing blue bowl by a tribesman. They lift the box only to reveal that now Alex is inside, dazed and confused. Roger reveals to Alex that the tribe said that they needed a trade for their secrets, and Roger reveals that he offered up Alex as the trade. Roger forces the liquid into Alex's mouth as he begs and pleads with him not to do this. After emptying the bowl, the lid is placed over Alex, who screams and cries as he's placed into the ground. Back in modern times, Roger gives an interview on TV about B. He shows the interviewer 2 apples, saying that they were picked years ago and have been treated with the chemical. He takes a bite and invites the interviewer to follow. After taking a bite, the interviewer says it tastes fresh. Roger remarks, as fresh as if it was just picked from the tree. He goes on to say that it's not limited to foods, that in fact the wood used to build houses will never rot, and that clothing will never fade. The interviewer jokes about how much money he'll save on suits before wrapping up the interview. Roger exits the room and pops another aspirin. A co-worker of Roger reveals that the FDA is holding off approval of the chemical. He says they are a bit freaked out after finding out about the death of Dan. Roger, on a short fuse, says he doesn't care how he does it, but the chemical needs to be approved and to not take no for an answer, or as he puts it, fuck Dan. In Roger's office, his co-worker asks him to see a doctor. Roger says he's fine as he requests his assistant to get him more aspirin. His co-worker says that he should find and talk to Kevin. Roger says they haven't spoken in years. The co-worker reminds him that Kevin and him are the only 2 who know about the origins of his soon-to-be-released chemical, and that he might be needed if they want to sway the FDA into a rapid approval. Later, Roger goes to visit Kevin. He goes to knock but notices the door is slightly open. He enters, and the apartment appears empty. He notices a glowing blue liquid dripping onto a plate in the living room. He walks in to find Kevin dead with a syringe in his neck filled with B, and the same note written on the other half of torn yellow notebook paper. I've not forgotten or forgiven, written in the same neat cursive as before. Roger tears off the note and runs back to his office building. He walks into the boardroom and sees his sleazy coworker sitting with his feet up. He yells that Kevin's dead before grabbing the man by the collar and pushing him against a wall. He accuses the man of setting him up to make it look like he killed him before throwing him across the room into some potted plants. He accuses him of orchestrating everything that's gone wrong before brutally killing him. Suddenly, Roger hears slow clapping. It's revealed to be coming from a decomposed Alex. It's unclear if this is actually happening or only going on in Roger's mind. Alex asks if he caught the killer yet, laughing that he's shocked that Roger hasn't figured it out by now. He snags the yellow letter from Roger's front pocket and a handwritten note on a nearby desk. Alex says the handwriting matches, revealing that Roger is the killer. But Roger shakes his head in disbelief and uses a decorative weapon to stab and behead Alex's walking corpse. Later, Roger returns home and calls Dr. Benaloy for a house call. The good doctor shows up and reveals that Roger isn't sick, he's cursed, saying that the particular curse is crafty. It turns a person's evil side into an active personality, and at such an advanced stage, curing it could end up killing Roger. But Roger, being beyond fed up with the situation, says he doesn't care, and that he just wants it gone. The doctor agrees, and they start a ritual. The doors fling open and Benaloy glides in dressed in full tribal garb. Roger screams in fright. Later, Roger calls his assistant, telling her to bring him 200 cc's of B in a syringe to his house. She says that the cops are there and want to talk to him. He says that he will, but he needs her to follow his instructions first. She shows up at his house with the chemical. She asks what this is all about. Roger says that Benaloy killed his evil half before it could take him over, but that his good half needs to be preserved. She flicks on the light and screams at the sight of him. It's implied that Roger had an extreme mental breakdown. There was no zombified Alex or Dr. Benaloy, and it was Roger who killed Kevin and Dan. He imagined everything. He then mutilated himself over the guilt of what he did to his friend Alex in Brazil, giving his two-faced nature a physical form. We see his grisly face as the screen fades to black. Halfway Horrible was adapted from a story in The Vault of Horror, issue number 26. In the original EC comic story, Halfway Horrible is a straightforward shock piece built around a single grotesque idea, a man whose face is permanently split between handsome and hideous. The comic leans hard into visual irony. His disfigurement is treated as fate, something inflicted on him, and the horror comes from how society reacts to what it sees. Like many EC stories, the message is blunt and external. Appearances dictate how the world treats you, and cruelty follows deformity. The episode reworks that idea into something far more psychological. Instead of the deformity being purely physical, the show strongly implies that much of what we're seeing may not be real at all. Roger isn't just a victim of circumstance. He's deeply unstable and mentally disturbed. The episode suggests that his other half may be a projection of guilt, self-loathing, or a fractured identity, turning the story inward rather than outward. What was once a visual gag in the comic becomes a question of mental collapse. The biggest name in Halfway Horrible is Clancy Brown, an actor most people immediately recognize even if they don't know his name. Horror fans remember him as the Kurgan in Highlander, where he played one of the most unhinged and intimidating villains of the 80s. A whole different generation knows him as the voice of Mr. Krabs on SpongeBob SquarePants, while genre fans might also recognize him as Gus, one of the brutal antagonists from Pet Sematary 2, a film I'll be covering in the future. Seeing Brown in Tales from the Crypt works so well because he's always excelled at playing characters that feel dangerous, unstable, or just slightly off. That makes him a perfect fit for the psychological horror at the center of this story. Though the overall episode loses some people by the end, mainly due to confusion over whether what they're seeing should be taken at face value or interpreted as subtext, it's still a classic. Either way it's viewed, it remains effective, and further proves why Clancy Brown is a legend in this kind of storytelling. Then, of course, there's Cheech Marin. Most people know him for the stoner comedy movies he starred in with Tommy Chong. In this story, however, he plays the character straight, no jokes or humor, which is another signature twist of Tales from the Crypt. Take what's expected and turn it upside down. At this point in Marin's career, he was feuding with Tommy Chong and wanted to distance himself and branch out from doing strictly comedic roles. He went on to appear in many movies and TV shows, including a major role as Joe Dominguez in the TV series Nash Bridges. Cheech and Chong officially reunited as a performing duo in 2008, more than 20 years after their breakup in 1985. They put aside their long-standing creative differences to launch the Light Up America comedy tour, marking their first major reunion in decades. They are still close today, describing their relationship not as a friendship, but more like a brotherhood. Our final tale is titled Staired In Horror from Season 6, Episode 9, originally airing on December 14th, 1994. Our story opens on a dark night in the forest. A fugitive named Clyde is fleeing from a search party formed by the town sheriff looking for him. After getting clotheslined by a tree branch, Clyde happens upon an old white manor in the woods. He bangs on the door in a panic. An older woman answers, and Clyde says that he's hurt real bad and pleads with the woman to let him in and help him out. She says she would, but she's alone. Clyde feigns understanding and pretends to faint at the front door. The elderly woman, named Lillian, answers the door, and Clyde scuttles in. He slams the door shut and locks it, and tells Lillian that they are after him for loving one of their daughters, and will hurt him if they know he's here. Lillian says she'll call the town sheriff, and he'll settle everything down. Clyde says that it's the sheriff's daughter, and he's the one chasing him down. Lillian says she'll get rid of him, and goes to answer the door. The sheriff says they're looking for a fugitive that's in the area. He continues to say he has a tattoo on his neck and is a killer, one who preys upon the elderly. And in fact, earlier that day, Clyde beat an elderly man at the town gas station, who later died in the hospital. The sheriff describes Clyde, and Lillian lies and says that she hasn't seen anyone matching that description. He tells her to keep her doors and windows locked before exiting her porch with the other lawmen. She invites Clyde into the dining room, saying she wants to look at his forehead. But Clyde forcefully asks for the keys to her car. Lillian only laughs, saying she doesn't have one. In fact, she doesn't have a phone either. Clyde sneers as Lillian pours them a cup of brandy. Clyde raises an antique gun, about to bring it down on Lillian, when she says to put it down, without so much as turning around. She says that she might be old but isn't foolish. She knows he's desperate, and whatever happened between him and that man he killed isn't her business. She reminds him that if he bashes her over the head and runs back out into the woods, he'll run right into the arms of the sheriff and his men. She continues to say that she hasn't had company in years and that he should spend the night, warning him not to do anything rash to her, as he'll need her help in finding his way out in the morning. He says she's old. What could she know? She shakes her head, telling him that everyone gets old. That's the way it's meant to be. Clyde denies it, saying he'll ride the sewer slide before he becomes old and useless like her. She just shakes her head and makes her way to the stairs. She jokes that she thinks it would be better if he stayed the night downstairs, commenting that she doesn't want a young buck like him to get the wrong idea, before laughing and wishing him good night. Once Lillian goes upstairs, Clyde steals an old pocket watch and plays with a Civil War sword, knocking over a candlestick holder and mockingly remarking that to win you gotta be strong, before hearing a young woman's voice upstairs. Clyde walks over and looks to the top of the steps to see a young, beautiful woman. Clyde asks her name and isn't shocked when he finds out her name is Lillian too, but she asks to be called Lily. Clyde goes to walk up the steps, but Lily stops him. She says that this old house has rules. Clyde says it's a good idea not to wake the old bat, and asks Lily to join him downstairs. She agrees and tells him to make them a couple of highballs, and that she'll be right down. Clyde pours them a drink and takes a sip as Lily walks into the room. Clyde is hugged from behind and he goes to squeeze Lily's butt cheek, but instead squeezes Lillian's butt. Clyde jumps away, cursing the old woman. She says she's sorry and didn't mean to frighten him. Clyde pulls the sword on her, telling her to go get Lily and bring her back here. Scared, Lillian says she'll show her to him and walks away. As she walks up the steps, Clyde waits at the bottom. She stops at an old portrait of Lily, saying it was her first communion. Lillian takes a few more steps and shows Clyde the portrait of her husband. Clyde doesn't seem to notice that Lillian's hand looks younger and her hair is now less gray. He stands at the bottom of the steps listening to her talk. She turns and it's Lily. She continues to tell the story that her husband left one day, off to see the world, and left her at home alone. Clyde looks on in confusion as she continues to talk. She says a young man came to the door one day. She was so lonely that she let him in, but just as luck would have it, her husband came home. He found them in bed together and dragged the man out of the room and down the steps in a rage. She knew that her husband would kill the man, and she felt that it wasn't his fault. The young man didn't know she was married, so she shot her husband to save the young man, and in his dying words, her husband cursed her, saying that no young man will ever climb these stairs to her bed again, nor will she descend the stairs in a shape that pleases men. Clyde, laughing, asks how she does that and runs up the steps. Clyde gets halfway up and looks at himself in the mirror and sees that he's suddenly middle-aged. Clyde walks backward down the steps as Lily continues talking, saying that downstairs she's too old and he's too young, and upstairs he's too old and she's too young. Clyde recoils in horror and disbelief, but she meets him in the middle of the steps. She grabs his hands to show him that right here, they are both the same age. They begin to kiss passionately, but they're interrupted by the sheriff and lawmen again. Lily tells Clyde to go upstairs, telling him that they aren't looking for an old man. She'll let them in, and once they see an old man at the top of the steps, they'll be left alone. Clyde climbs a staircase and grows older as Lily descends the steps and also becomes old herself. She answers the door, and the sheriff says their dogs keep circling the house and that he believes that Clyde broke in and she's unaware of it. Lily lets them in, and the dog, picking up on Clyde's scent, tries to ascend the steps, but his fur grows gray and he begins whimpering. The dog can feel himself getting old and decides to turn back and return to the sheriff. The dog is so freaked out that it bolts from the sheriff's grip and runs out the front door. The sheriff apologizes and leaves quickly, but Clyde, fearing they will come upstairs, goes to the attic. Lily yells up to Clyde, saying that they left. She runs upstairs and becomes young again, following Clyde deeper into the house. She sees the door open to the steps leading up to the attic. Up there, Clyde is so old he can't move. Lily calls after him and climbs the steps to the attic. But just as it made him very old, it made Lily very young. The baby Lillian crawls toward Clyde as he grunts in horror, and the screen fades to black. When it comes to Staired In Horror, it's one of the shorter stories in Tales from the Crypt, but it packs a lot of creepy ingenuity into its runtime. The episode is based on a story from the Vault of Horror, issue number 23. Like many Crypt stories, it blends supernatural elements with a darkly ironic twist, and this one in particular plays with the idea of age and time in a very unique way. The cast is packed with recognizable faces from the 80s. Leading the episode as the fugitive Clyde is D.B. Sweeney, best known for his role as Travis Walton in Fire in the Sky, the extraterrestrial horror film based on a real-life alleged alien abduction. Sweeney brings a grounded sense of fear to Clyde, making his panic and desperation feel believable, even in such an outlandish scenario. Adding to the star power is R. Lee Ermey, who appears as the town sheriff. Best known as Sergeant Hartman in Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket, Ermey brings his signature commanding presence and over-the-top intensity to the role, even in this smaller part. It's fun to see an actor so closely associated with military roles pop up in a horror story, though any horror fan knows this wasn't his only step into the genre. Last but not least is Rachel Ticotin, who plays both Lillian and her younger counterpart, Lily. Ticotin is perhaps best known for her role as Melina, Arnold Schwarzenegger's love interest in Total Recall. Here, she explores a very different side of horror, playing a character who is nurturing, mysterious, and central to the episode's supernatural twist. One of the things that makes Staired In Horror stand out is its inventive use of practical effects. The staircase curse, aging characters as they move up or down, was achieved using clever makeup and camera angles, creating a surreal and unsettling visual experience. Even the sheriff's dog isn't spared from the aging effect, showing there's no mercy for anyone or anything. Ultimately, this episode is a perfect example of what made Tales from the Crypt so memorable. It combines dark humor, supernatural twists, and strong performances from recognizable actors. And while it may be shorter than some of the more sprawling episodes, it's compact, eerie, and effective. A story that lingers in your mind long after the credits roll. But that's all I have for you in this one. I made a small mistake on my Patreon page and set it to 18+, and by making it adult only, I locked myself out of posting videos on the page. I have a ticket in with Patreon's support team, so that should be fixed fairly soon. I don't have any adult videos. God knows, nobody wants to see that. It's just uncensored and ad-free versions of my YouTube content. So I do have a Patreon, just the most recent videos ain't listed yet. I wanted to give a special thank you to our channel members and to everyone who takes the time to watch my videos. It genuinely means a lot. Take care, have a great week, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.